Sara woke up early, as she did every day, the soft morning light filtering through the thin curtains of their small apartment. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, a comforting scent she had grown accustomed to over the years. She moved quietly, careful not to wake David, her husband, who had been asleep on the couch again, as he often was. It had been months since he had held a steady job, and Sara felt the weight of their financial situation pressing down on her like a heavy blanket. She had always imagined that marriage would be a partnership, with both of them working together to build a life, but the reality was far from what she had hoped. David spent most of his days in front of the television or playing video games, barely acknowledging the mounting bills or the tension in the air. As she poured herself a cup of coffee, Sara's mind wandered to the growing pile of unpaid bills on the counter. Electricity, rent, groceries, and other essentials seemed to multiply overnight. She wondered how she had managed to keep everything running smoothly for so long without David's help. Sometimes she felt proud of her ability to manage, but other times she felt overwhelmed, angry, and lonely. She remembered the early days of their marriage, when David had been full of ambition and dreams. He had promised her a life of partnership and teamwork, but those promises seemed to have faded like mist over time. Sara sighed, staring at the bills. Something had to change, she thought. She could not carry this burden alone forever. After finishing her coffee, Sara went about her morning routine. She cleaned the kitchen, did the laundry, and made a small breakfast for herself. David stirred on the couch, mumbling something incoherent, and she glanced at him with a mix of frustration and sadness. It was difficult to see the man she loved, once so lively and motivated, now so complacent and detached from reality. She wanted to help him, to inspire him to take action, but she also realized that she could not force change on someone unwilling to change themselves. Sara felt torn between love and practicality, hope and disappointment. She knew she needed a plan to address the problem before it grew too large to handle. Later that morning, Sara decided to call her best friend, Lily, for advice. She needed someone to listen without judgment, someone who could offer perspective. "I don't know what to do anymore," she admitted as soon as Lily answered. "I can't keep managing everything on my own. David just sits around all day, and nothing ever changes. I'm exhausted." Lily listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and support. "Have you tried talking to him seriously?" she asked. "Sometimes people need a wake-up call, Sara. You've been carrying him for too long, and he needs to understand the consequences of his inaction." Sara nodded, even though Lily could not see her. She had tried hints, gentle reminders, and even casual suggestions, but David seemed to ignore them or brush them off. "I know," she said softly. I don't want to hurt him, but I can't keep going like this. I feel like I'm stuck in a loop, and I don't know how to break it." Lily's words resonated with her. Perhaps it was time for a serious, honest conversation, one that could not be avoided. Sara hung up the phone, her mind racing with possibilities. She needed to approach David calmly but firmly, and she needed to prepare herself emotionally for whatever reaction he might have. That afternoon, as David lazily flicked through television channels, Sara entered the living room with determination in her eyes. "David, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady but serious. He barely looked at her, engrossed in the screen, until he finally muttered, "About what?" Sara took a deep breath. "About our life, about us, and about your job situation. We can't continue like this. I'm struggling, and I need you to be part of the solution." David shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. He had heard similar words before, but this time, there was a sense of finality in Sara's tone that made him pause. He knew she was serious. I just don't know what to do," David said, his voice low and defensive. "It's hard out there. Jobs are scarce, and I've been trying, but nothing works." Sara sat beside him, trying to maintain patience and understanding. "I understand that it's difficult," she replied gently. "But doing nothing isn't the answer. We need to find a way together. I need you to make an effort, to take small steps, even if it's just updating your resume, applying online, or asking around. We can't wait for luck to solve this for us." David looked down at his hands, realizing that she was right. He had been waiting for things to change on their own, hoping circumstances would improve without taking responsibility. Over the next few hours, Sara and David talked more openly than they had in months. She listened to his fears and frustrations, and he listened to hers. Slowly, David began to express a willingness to try, a small spark of motivation ignited by Sara's honesty and concern. Sara felt a cautious sense of hope. Change would not happen overnight, she knew, but this conversation was the first step. She realized that communication, patience, and mutual support were crucial. Both of them had roles to play in their future, and it was time to acknowledge that reality. As evening approached, Sara prepared dinner while David sat quietly, thinking about the conversation. For the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of his actions, or lack of them. He understood that love alone could not sustain a marriage. Effort, responsibility, and commitment were equally important. He promised himself silently that he would take the necessary steps, not just for Sara, but for himself as well. Sara served dinner, and although the atmosphere was still tense, there was a newfound sense of possibility in the air. Both of them knew the road ahead would be challenging, but at least they were beginning to face it together. Before going to bed, Sara sat by the window, looking out at the city lights and reflecting on the day. She felt tired but determined, knowing that confronting a difficult problem was always better than avoiding it. Life was not always easy, and relationships required effort, patience, and understanding. She knew there would be setbacks, arguments, and moments of doubt, but she also knew that facing the truth was the first step toward change. Sara felt a small sense of accomplishment, a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, things could improve if they both worked together. She turned off the light, ready to face whatever came next, confident that she had taken the first step in transforming their lives. The next morning, Sara woke up with a mixture of hope and anxiety. The conversation she had with David yesterday still lingered in her mind. She could feel a subtle change in the atmosphere at home, a small shift that suggested things might finally be moving in the right direction. David, too, seemed different. He wasn't his usual lethargic self. There was a quiet seriousness in his eyes, a thoughtfulness that hadn't been there before. Sara hoped it was not just a temporary feeling, but the beginning of a real change. She prepared breakfast, her mind filled with plans to support him without overwhelming him, and as she served the food, she noticed that David was already awake, sitting at the table with his laptop open, something he hadn't done in months. "Good morning," she said cautiously, trying not to sound too expectant. David looked up and gave a small smile, nodding. "Morning," he replied softly. He seemed more aware of his surroundings, more present. Sara wondered if he had stayed up late thinking, or if he had made a decision overnight that he had not yet shared. She chose to remain patient, knowing that change often started with small steps, not sudden leaps. They ate breakfast in a quiet but comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts, and for the first time in a long while, Sara felt a sense of cautious optimism. After breakfast, David closed his laptop and looked at Sara. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began hesitantly. "And I realize I've been avoiding responsibility. I've been selfish, I guess. I want to try. I don't want to make things harder for you anymore." Sara felt a wave of relief and hope, mixed with a cautious skepticism. She had heard words like this before, promises that faded over time, but there was something different in his tone today, something sincere. "I'm glad you feel that way," she replied gently. "It's not going to be easy, and I can't do it for you, but I will support you. We can take it one step at a time." David nodded, taking a deep breath. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted. Sara encouraged him to focus on small, achievable tasks. "Let's start by updating your resume," she suggested. "Then we can look for jobs online, maybe ask around with friends or family. The key is to start moving forward, even slowly." David agreed, and they spent the rest of the morning working together. Sara guided him on formatting his resume, listing his skills, and highlighting his experience. For the first time in months, David was focused and engaged, asking questions, considering his strengths and weaknesses, and making small but significant changes to his approach. In the afternoon, they researched job openings online. David applied for a few positions cautiously, unsure but motivated. Sara watched him carefully, offering encouragement and advice when needed, careful not to pressure him too much. She realized that her role now was not to push him, but to support him, to help him regain confidence in his own abilities. As they worked, David began to talk about his fears, the possibility of rejection, the anxiety of interviews, and his concern about not being good enough. Sara listened patiently, offering reassurance. "Everyone starts somewhere," she said. "Even if you face setbacks, it doesn't mean you're failing. You're learning, and every step counts." Later that evening, David received a call from one of the companies he had applied to. They wanted to schedule an interview. He was nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he spoke to Sara about it. "I can't believe this is happening," he whispered. Sara smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's happening because you're trying," she said softly. "You took the first step, and now opportunities are opening up. Be confident, be honest, and just do your best." David nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. He realized that effort, not luck, was beginning to create change in his life. In the days that followed, David prepared for the interview diligently. He practiced answers to common questions, polished his resume, and even researched the company. Sara continued to support him, offering guidance without controlling him. The process was challenging, and there were moments of doubt and anxiety, but David persisted. He began to feel a sense of pride in his efforts, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. Sara noticed subtle changes in him, the way he held himself, the determination in his voice, the careful attention to detail. She felt proud, not just of the progress in their financial situation, but of the growth in his character. Finally, the day of the interview arrived. David was nervous, pacing in the living room, rehearsing answers under his breath. Sara offered calming words and reminded him to focus on his strengths. "Be yourself," she said. "They want to see who you really are, not someone you think they want. You can do this." David took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. He left for the interview, and Sara stayed behind, cleaning the house and trying to keep herself occupied while worrying quietly. She knew the outcome was uncertain, but she also knew that the effort itself was a victory. Hours later, David returned home, looking tired but happy. "I got the job," he said, his voice full of disbelief and joy. Sara felt a surge of relief and pride, tears welling up in her eyes. She hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of the past months lift slightly. David smiled, a genuine, confident smile that she hadn't seen in years. He realized that responsibility, effort, and perseverance could lead to change. Sara realized that love, patience, and support could help someone rediscover themselves. They had both learned valuable lessons, that life required effort, that partnerships required balance, and that change was always possible when people faced challenges together. That night, they sat together in the living room, talking about plans for the future. David shared ideas for his new job, how he could contribute, and even thoughts about saving and budgeting better. Sara listened, offering guidance but also letting him take ownership of his decisions. The apartment felt different, lighter, warmer, filled with a sense of possibility. Both of them understood that life would still have challenges, but they were ready to face them together. There was a new sense of respect, understanding, and partnership in their relationship, and for the first time in a long while, Sara felt hope for the future. As she went to bed, Sara reflected on the journey they had just begun. Change was never easy, and it required honesty, effort, and courage. But witnessing David's determination and growth gave her faith that things could get better. She realized that love was not just about affection, it was about support, understanding, and helping each other become better versions of themselves. David, lying beside her, reached for her hand, a silent promise of commitment and effort. Sara smiled, squeezing his hand gently, knowing that they were no longer two separate people struggling against life, but a team ready to face whatever came next, together.